A single eye stares back at us from the heart of ancient myth. We think we know the Cyclops, but we have only seen the monster in the storybook shadow. The truth hiding behind that legendary gaze is far stranger and more significant. By the end of our journey, you will possess a complete esoteric key to understanding this giant, revealing its shocking links to lost civilizations, secret symbolism, and the deepest layers of your own mind. Was the Cyclops a historical reality? And what does its blinding single eye truly see? We are about to peel back the mythic layers one by one. What is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of a giant? But the story of the one-eyed giant does not begin with a blinded monster in a cave. Long before the Cyclops became a figure of terror in sailors' tales, it held a place of profound reverence. We must travel back to the very dawn of the gods themselves, to the first beings who bore the name. These are the primordial Cyclopes, and they were not monsters at all. They were cosmic artisans, born from the union of the earth, Gaia, and the sky, Uranus. They were three brothers with names that echo the raw power of a storm. Bronze meaning thunder, Steropes meaning lightning, Arges meaning brightness. Can you feel the energy in those names? They are not titles for simple giants. They are designations for forces of nature given form. These brothers were the ultimate blacksmiths of the divine realm. Their workshop was not a simple cave, but a forge at the heart of creation itself. With focused, unimaginable skill, they crafted the very weapons that define the cosmic order. It was their hands that forged the thunderbolts of Zeus, the very symbols of kingly power and celestial authority. They created the mighty trident for Poseidon, the instrument that could shake the earth and command the seas, and they fashioned the helmet of invisibility for Hades, an object of profound subtlety and shadow. Think about that for a moment. The tools that allowed the gods to rule the universe, to control the sky, the sea, and the underworld, all came from the Cyclopes. They were the master craftsmen behind the scenes, the indispensable source of divine power. This changes everything about the symbol of the single eye. In this primordial context, that eye is not a limitation. It is the ultimate tool of a master artisan. It represents a laser-focused vision, an undivided attention to the task at hand. When you are forging the lightning bolt of a god, you cannot afford distraction. Your entire being, your entire perception, must be channeled into a single point of immense creative force. The eye of the Cyclops, therefore, becomes a symbol of supreme craftsmanship, of the ability to see the true essence of a thing and shape it with divine intention. They did not wander the hills, they shaped the foundations of the world, so we are left with a powerful duality. From these revered smiths of the cosmos, how did their legacy transform into the frightening, cave-dwelling brute we know so well? The answer lies in a later generation, a different kind of giant entirely. The shift from cosmic artisans to cave-dwelling monsters is a story of power, fear, and rebellion. To understand this transformation, we must turn to one of the oldest surviving texts of Greek mythology, Hesiod's Theogony. This is not just a story of gods and monsters. It is a cosmic family history, a genealogy of creation itself, and within it, the Cyclopes play a pivotal, tragic, and ultimately redemptive role. Hesiod tells us they were born as three brothers, Bronze, Steropes, and Arges, the children of Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky. But their father took one look at his powerful, unusual sons and was filled with a deep, primal terror. He saw not divine craftsmen, but a threat to his own rule. Their single, burning eye in the middle of their foreheads represented a form of perception he could not control, a focus that saw too clearly. So, in a brutal act of suppression, Uranus did the unthinkable. He imprisoned his own children, pushing them back into the dark womb of their mother, Gaia, casting them deep into the pit of Tartarus. This is our first crucial archetype, The Cyclopes here symbolize raw, untamed potential, a creative and destructive power so immense that the established order, represented by Uranus, fears it and tries to bury it alive. They are the genius, the brilliant idea, the volcanic force of nature that is locked away because it is too disruptive, too strange, too powerful to be allowed into the light. Their imprisonment is an act of cosmic censorship. For ages, they languish in that abyss, their thunder, lightning, and brightness smothered in endless night. Their liberation comes in waves, each more significant than the last. First, Gaia, aching from the burden of her imprisoned children, conspires with her other sons, the Titans. She fashions a great sickle, and the Titan Kronos uses it to overthrow his father Uranus. As part of this revolution, the Cyclopes are briefly freed. But the pattern repeats. Kronos, now the new ruler, looks upon the Cyclopes with the same fear his father had. He sees them not as allies, but as potential rivals, as weapons that could one day be turned against him. So he seizes them and hurls them right back into Tartarus. The cycle is clear. Every ruler fears the very source of power that could challenge them. The Cyclopes become a symbol of the repressed, the creative force that every generation of authority tries to chain down. Their final and definitive liberation is orchestrated by Zeus. In the great war against the Titans, the Titanomachy, Zeus seeks every advantage. He descends into the terrible darkness of Tartarus and frees the Cyclopes and their monstrous brothers, the Hecatoncheires. This is a masterstroke of cosmic strategy. Zeus does not fear their power. He recognizes its necessity. In gratitude for their freedom, the Cyclopes do, for Zeus, what they were always meant to do. They become his divine armory. In the forges of their newfound liberty, they craft his ultimate weapon, the thunderbolt. With this weapon, forged by the very beings his predecessors had feared and imprisoned, Zeus defeats the old order of the Titans and establishes the reign of the Olympians. Here lies the profound esoteric lesson. The Cyclopes transition from imprisoned outcasts to essential pillars of the new kingdom. They represent the chaotic, primal forces of the universe that cannot be simply destroyed or ignored. They must be acknowledged, liberated, and integrated. Zeus, as the wise sovereign, understands that true power is not about suppressing the strange and the potent, but about forging an alliance with it. The single eye, once a mark of monstrous otherness, becomes the focused lens through which the raw materials of chaos are shaped into the instruments of order. Their story asks us a compelling question. What immense potential lies imprisoned within your own depths, locked away because some part of you, or the world around you, deemed it too powerful or too strange to be set free? Yet this alliance with cosmic order would not last for all their kind. Centuries after the divine forges cooled, a different kind of Cyclops emerged from the mists of the Aegean Sea, one who had forgotten his celestial heritage. This is Polyphemus, the shepherd, the monster of Homer's Odyssey, and his story is a dark mirror to that of his primordial ancestors. Odysseus and his weary men, blown off course by vengeful winds, stumble upon a lush, untamed island. Seeking shelter and supplies, they find a vast cave, its entrance framed by towering rocks. Inside, they discover a bounty of cheese, milk, and pens full of sheep. But this is no ordinary shepherd's home. The scale of everything is wrong. The cheese wheels are massive, the milk pails are like cauldrons, and the club by the entrance is the size of a ship's mast. This is the domain of a giant. When Polyphemus returns, he seals the cave entrance with a boulder no mortal crew could ever move. He is a being of immense physical power, but Homer paints him as a crude and savage figure. He tends his flocks with a kind of brute simplicity, then turns his attention to his unexpected guests, with no regard for the sacred laws of hospitality, a cornerstone of Greek civilization known as Xenia. He seizes two of Odysseus's men, dashes their heads against the ground, and devours them whole. This act of cannibalism marks him as the ultimate outsider, a creature living beyond the codes of gods and men. Odysseus, the cunning hero, tries to reason with him, invoking the name of Zeus, the protector of guests and hosts. Polyphemus's reply is one of the most chilling and revealing lines in all of epic poetry. He laughs a terrible laugh and says, "The Cyclopes pay no heed to Zeus, nor to the blessed gods. We are greater by far." This is not just blasphemy. It is a declaration of an entirely separate reality. Polyphemus lives by what the Greeks called physis, raw nature, instinct, and brute force. He rejects nomos, the constructed order of law, custom, and divine decree that holds human civilization together. His single eye is no longer a tool of divine focus. It is a symbol of a singular, self-centered worldview, a perception that sees only its own needs, its own appetites, and its own power. He is a force of pure, unintegrated chaos, a living embodiment of what happens when the primal potential of the early Cyclopes is not forged into something greater, but is left to fester in isolation. His cave is not a workshop of creation, but a prison of his own making, sealed by that massive stone. When Odysseus finally blinds that single eye with a sharpened, heated stake, the act is rich with symbolic meaning. It is not merely a physical defeat. It is the piercing of a delusion, the violent introduction of a painful new perspective into a mind that refused to see anything but itself. The giant's roar of agony echoes, the shock of a confined consciousness being forced to confront a world it had denied. So we are presented with two poles of the same mythic being. On one end, the cosmic artisans whose focused vision built the weapons of the gods. On the other, the savage shepherd whose narrow vision led only to his own downfall. One represents integrated, purposeful power. The other represents isolated, self-consuming instinct. This duality begs a deeper question. If the single eye can symbolize both supreme craftsmanship and monstrous ego, what does that tell us about the nature of focus itself? Is it a gift or a curse? The answer, as we will see, lies not in the myths of Greece alone, but in echoes found across the ancient world. That piercing of Polyphemus's eye reveals a shocking truth about the symbol itself. The single eye of the Cyclops is not a mark of lack, but of a terrifying and potent abundance. It represents a mode of perception so concentrated, so utterly undivided, that it becomes a tool of either creation or destruction. This is the core of our esoteric unmasking. Long before Eastern spiritual traditions spoke of the third eye, the myth of the one-eyed giant was exploring the same profound territory. That central orb is the eye of wisdom, the inner eye that sees the unified field behind the world of opposites. We live in a reality of duality, of light and dark, good and evil, self and other. Our two physical eyes reinforce this. They give us depth perception by presenting two slightly different views, allowing us to navigate a world of separate objects. But the single eye of the Cyclops operates on a different principle entirely. It does not see separation. It sees essence. It perceives the underlying unity of things, the raw material of existence, before it is split into pairs of opposites. Think of the primordial Cyclopes in their forge. They did not see mere metal and fire. With their singular gaze, they perceived the potential for a thunderbolt within the ore, the divine pattern hidden within the chaos. Their focus pulled that unified vision into reality. This is why their power was both revered and feared. To see the world this way is to possess a kind of psychic laser. It can cut through illusion, through the distracting noise of everyday life, and strike directly at the heart of a matter. In occult and mystical thought, this singular point of focus is the master key. It is the foundation of effective meditation, where the practitioner learns to quiet the chattering mind, to withdraw attention from the 10,000 things of the world and concentrate it on a single point, a mantra, a flame, or the breath. This collapse of awareness into a unified state is the gateway to higher consciousness. It is also the engine of true manifestation. The scattered mind wishes for 100 different things and achieves none. The mind with the focus of a Cyclops visualizes one desired outcome with such intensity and clarity that it begins to pull that reality from the realm of potential into the realm of the tangible. The giant, therefore, becomes an archetype of immense, undivided psychic power. But here lies the critical warning embedded in the myth, the difference between Polyphemus and his ancestors. This power is neutral. It is pure voltage. How it is used defines everything. When directed outward with wisdom and intention, like the divine smiths, it forges the lightning bolts of Zeus. It creates order from chaos. It manifests destiny. When turned inward upon itself, consumed by ego and appetite like the savage shepherd, it becomes a prison. It sees only its own hunger, its own rage, its own isolated self. That cave, sealed with a boulder, is the perfect symbol of a consciousness that has used its immense power of focus to wall itself off from the greater cosmos. So the Cyclops challenges us with a profound question about our own perception. Where in your life is your vision scattered, pulled in a dozen directions by distraction and duality? And where might you benefit from summoning the fierce, unifying focus of the single eye? But this symbol was not confined to the shores of Greece. Its echo resonates in ancient ruins across the globe, suggesting a memory far older than Homer. This immense power of focus carries a terrifying shadow, for the single eye, in its most unbalanced form, does not see more of reality. It sees less. It trades the panoramic view for a piercing but narrow beam, and in doing so, it can blind us to everything outside its intense, self-chosen target. This is the danger of spiritual inflation, a perilous state where a glimpse of higher truth convinces someone they have grasped the entire cosmos. The myth of Polyphemus offers the perfect, chilling allegory for this. Remember, after Odysseus blinds the giant, he and his men escape by clinging to the undersides of the giant's own sheep. Polyphemus, in his agony and rage, feels the backs of the animals as they leave the cave, but his shattered perception cannot conceive of a reality where his prey might be hiding beneath. He is literally incapable of looking down. His world has collapsed into the singular experience of his pain and his lost supremacy. He possesses immense power, but his vision is so constricted, so singular, that he becomes a fool, easily tricked by a more holistic mind. This is the fate of the unintegrated seeker. Imagine someone who, through deep meditation or study, touches a profound spiritual truth. They feel a rush of energy, a sense of connection to something vast. But instead of humbly integrating that experience, they let it inflate their ego. They begin to believe their singular insight is the only valid one. They develop a kind of psychic tunnel vision, seeing only the path they are on and dismissing all others as wrong or inferior. They may wield spiritual concepts as weapons, using terms like karma or divine will to judge others, all while missing the fundamental lesson of compassion. This is the Cyclops in his cave, roaring about his own greatness, utterly blind to the subtle movements of life happening right under his nose. In esoteric psychology, this is often called spiritual bypassing. It is the use of spiritual ideas to avoid dealing with human wounds, emotional baggage, or shadow aspects of the self. The person becomes a giant in their own mind, a wielder of cosmic principles, yet they remain a prisoner to their own unhealed pain, which they can no longer see because their single eye is fixed only on the light. They have power without wisdom, insight without humility, vision without connection. The true spiritual journey, in contrast to the Cyclops' fate, is about the integration of the one and the many. It is about learning to focus that single eye of inner vision with the precision of a master smith, while never forgetting to use your two physical eyes to navigate the shared, compassionate world of human relationship. It is the balance between seeing the unified field and honoring the diverse, beautiful expressions within it. The Cyclops therefore stands as an eternal guardian at this crossroads. He represents both the awesome potential and the profound peril of concentrated consciousness. His story asks us to examine our own gaze. Where have we become spiritually myopic? Where has a powerful idea or experience made us arrogant, sealing us in a cave of our own certainty? And how can we use our hard-won focus not to dominate, but to create, to connect, and to see the world finally with both profound depth and generous breadth? The giant's gaze now shifts from the cave's shadow to the impossible weight of stone. Scattered across the ancient landscapes of Greece, there stand ruins that defy simple explanation. Towering walls built from limestone boulders so massive that each one weighs as much as a modern truck. These stones are not neatly cut bricks. They are raw, irregular monsters of rock, fitted together with such staggering precision that you cannot slip a knife blade between them. The Greeks, who looked upon these ruins centuries later, structures like the mighty Lion Gate of Mycenae or the terrifying walls of Turin, had a simple, awe-struck explanation. Only the Cyclopes, the one-eyed giants of legend, could have lifted and placed such impossible blocks. They called this construction Cyclopean masonry. It is a term that bridges our myth directly into physical reality, a fossilized memory pressed into the earth itself. Think of the sheer scale. We are not talking about stones a team of oxen could drag. We are speaking of monoliths that modern engineers would struggle to move without hydraulic cranes and steel cables. The ancients had no such technology, at least none that we recognize from the history books. So how was it done? The mainstream archaeological view points to immense human labor, wooden rollers, levers, and ramps over decades. But the folk memory encoded in the name Cyclopean whispers a different, more tantalizing possibility. What if the myth of the giant builders is not pure fantasy, but a distorted echo of a real historical truth? This is a core theme in alternative history and esoteric lore. Around the world, from the Andes to Egypt to distant Pacific islands, we find these megalithic puzzles, stones cut and placed with a sophistication that seems to leapfrog the supposed technological timeline. The common thread in many cultural memories is the same: a race of giants, gods, or a lost people of great stature and knowledge who built these wonders before vanishing into the mists of a great cataclysm. The Cyclopes, then, become more than a monster in a poem. They transform into potential custodians of a forgotten science. Their single eye might symbolize not just focus, but a different mode of perception altogether, one that understood the hidden properties of stone, the laws of leverage and vibration, or perhaps even a form of lost technology that could soften rock or negate gravity. When you stand before a Cyclopean wall, you are not just looking at a fortification. You are staring at a question carved in limestone. The myth insists these works required a being of superhuman scale and strength. The stones themselves silently agree. This creates a powerful feedback loop between story and substance. The physical evidence gives weight to the myth, and the myth provides a narrative container for the evidence that conventional history cannot comfortably hold. It suggests that our past is far deeper and stranger than any textbook dares to admit, that before the rise of classical Greece, before even the Trojan War, another civilization walked this earth, leaving behind only these gargantuan footprints in stone and the persistent legend of the one-eyed ones who built them. What forgotten chapter of human history, or perhaps pre-human history, is staring back at us through these silent, Cyclopean eyes? That silent question in the stone leads us to a startling possibility. What if the Cyclops was not born in the imagination, but in a memory? What if the terrifying one-eyed giant began as a real, flesh and blood creature witnessed by ancient people, a creature whose remains they might have actually held in their hands. This is the forgotten race theory, and it offers one of the most compelling bridges between myth and material evidence. The theory does not suggest that 30-foot-tall giants with one eye roam the hills. Instead, it proposes that the myth is a fossilized recollection, a story that mutated over countless retellings to explain something genuinely strange that our ancestors encountered. One of the most famous pieces of evidence for this is both bizarre and brilliant. On many Mediterranean islands, like Crete and Sicily, archaeologists have unearthed the skulls of prehistoric dwarf elephants. These creatures died out long before the rise of Greek civilization. Now, picture such a skull, weathered and brown, tumbling from a hillside after a storm. An ancient farmer or shepherd stumbles upon it. He has no concept of paleontology, no frame of reference for an elephant, especially a miniature one. He picks up the large, unfamiliar skull. He sees the massive central nasal cavity where the trunk was anchored. To his eyes, this huge, single hole in the center of the forehead looks exactly like a giant eye socket. He assumes the rest, fleshing out the bones in his mind with the logic of a monster. The smaller, actual eye sockets on the sides of the skull might be overlooked or mistaken for ears. In a single, terrifying moment, the farmer has discovered proof of a one-eyed giant. He carries the skull back to his village, and a legend is cemented into oral history. This is not wild speculation. The Greek historian Thucydides, writing in the 5th century before the Common Era, noted that the earliest inhabitants of Sicily were said to be the Cyclopes. Coincidentally or not, Sicily is one of the very islands where those dwarf elephant skulls have been found. The geography of the myth and the geography of the fossils align perfectly. But the theory expands beyond misidentified bones. Consider another profound idea, the mythologizing of isolated tribes of archaic-humans. We now know that different species of humans once shared the earth. Neanderthals, with their prominent brow ridges, robust builds, and different ways of living, coexisted with our ancestors for thousands of years. What stories would early Homo sapiens tell about these other, powerful people they might have encountered only rarely in the deep forests or remote mountains? A band of hunters sees a distant, stocky figure with a heavy gait and a face that seems all brow. They never get a close look. In the retelling around the fire, the details blur and magnify. The heavy brow becomes a single, massive ridge. The powerful, unfamiliar physique becomes gigantic. The being, living outside the norms of the tribe, becomes a monstrous, cave-dwelling other. This process is not unique to Greece. Cultures worldwide have stories of wild men, forest giants, and ancient builders, often describing features that eerily match what we now know of other hominids. This connects to a broader concept known as hyperdiffusionism, the idea that ancient myths are not pure inventions, but the worn-down, fantastical coins of a much older historical currency. They are the last echoes of events, encounters, and peoples from a time so distant it has faded into the symbolic. The great flood myths found on every continent. The stories of gods who came from the stars and taught humanity arts and sciences. And yes, the tales of a race of mighty, one-eyed builders. These narratives, according to this view, contain a kernel of truth about forgotten epochs, about cataclysms and lost civilizations, about encounters with beings we can no longer fully comprehend. The Cyclops, therefore, stands at the crossroads of several profound human experiences. It is a possible explanation for a strange fossil. It is a potential memory of a different kind of human. It is a symbolic representation of a lost, megalithic building culture. The myth becomes a tapestry woven from many different threads of reality. This shifts the giant from a fairy tale monster to a profound historical echo. It asks us to listen more carefully to the old stories, not as childish fables, but as the deepest memories of our species, encrypted in symbol and hyperbole. What other giants are hiding in our oldest tales, waiting for a key to unlock their true origin? But this forgotten race theory points to a deeper, more personal truth. The Cyclops is not just a memory in the earth or a skull in the hills. He is a memory within us. He lives in the dark, unexplored chambers of the human psyche, an archetype of immense power. Through the lens of Jungian psychology, the one-eyed giant becomes a stunningly clear symbol of what Carl Jung called the shadow. This is the part of ourselves that our conscious mind, our polite, civilized persona, tries to disown. It contains all the instincts, desires, and raw energies that do not fit the tidy image we present to the world. For the ancient Greeks, personified by the cunning, strategic Odysseus, civilization meant order, law, hospitality, and reason. The Cyclops, Polyphemus, is the absolute inversion of every single one of those values. He lives in a cave, not a city. He devours guests. He mocks the gods. He follows no law but his own hunger. He has raw instinct, unbridled appetite, and a terrifying connection to the untamed earth. He is, in essence, everything that Greek society had to repress in order to build its temples and write its philosophies. Odysseus, the hero of conscious intellect and cleverness, does not negotiate with this force. He blinds it. This is one of the most potent symbolic acts in all of mythology. It is not merely a hero defeating a monster. It is the conscious ego, the part of us that navigates the daylight world of rules and roles, violently subduing the unconscious, instinctual forces that threaten to overwhelm it. The heated stake is the searing light of reason used not to illuminate, but to obliterate a form of knowing it cannot understand. Think of your own inner landscape. We all have a Polyphemus within. It is the surge of rage you quickly suppress, the primal fear you dismiss as irrational, the raw creative urge you label as impractical, the deep bodily wisdom you ignore in favor of overthinking. Our modern civilization, much like ancient Greece, teaches us to wall off these aspects. We are told to be productive, not passionate, to be logical, not intuitive, to be composed, not wild. We take our own inner giant, with all its fierce power and connection to something ancient, and we push it back into the cave of the unconscious. We seal the entrance with the boulder of busyness, distraction, and social expectation, and there it sits, in the dark, growing hungry and resentful. The problem is, we cannot truly kill this giant. We can only blind ourselves to it, and a blinded giant is a dangerous one. It stumbles around in our inner darkness, causing havoc. It emerges as unexplained anxiety, as compulsive behaviors, as explosive anger that seems to come from nowhere, or as a deep, persistent feeling of being disconnected from life itself. This is the cost of the victory Odysseus won. He saved his crew, but he maimed a part of the natural world, and by extension, a part of himself. The myth, then, offers a profound challenge to the modern seeker. The spiritual journey is not about repeating Odysseus's act of blinding. It is about doing what he could not. It is about having the courage to return to that cave, not as a conqueror with a weapon, but as an explorer with a lantern. It is about learning to see the giant not as a monster to be destroyed, but as a lost part of your own wholeness. That raw instinct holds vital energy. That untamed appetite, when understood, can transform into passionate purpose. That connection to the earth is the root of genuine vitality. The task is not to let the giant run the show, but to integrate him, to bring that immense, focused power out of the shadows and into the service of your conscious life. So the question the Cyclops howls from his darkened cave is this: what parts of your own primal nature have you imprisoned? What instincts have you blinded because they seemed too messy, too powerful, or too frightening for your civilized self to acknowledge? Your liberation and your true power may depend on your answer. Yet even a blinded giant is not beyond the reach of transformation. centuries after Homer, the Roman poet Ovid revisited the cave of Polyphemus and found not a roaring monster, but a lovesick fool. In his epic Metamorphoses, Ovid spins a tale that complicates everything we think we know about the one-eyed brute. This is the story of Polyphemus and the sea nymph Galatea, and it adds a startling layer of pathos to the myth. Here, the Cyclops is no longer just a terror. He is capable of a deep, aching, and utterly human emotion. He falls in love. Galatea is a being of fluid grace and shimmering beauty, a spirit of the sea, all motion and light. Polyphemus, the creature of the solid earth and the dark cave, sees her and is undone. He tries, in his clumsy, gigantic way, to make himself worthy. He combs his shaggy hair with a rake. He trims his wild beard with a scythe. He stares into a pool of water to practice a pleasant expression, though his own reflection likely terrifies the fish. He even attempts to sing love songs, though his voice is like boulders crashing down a mountain. He offers her gifts from his domain, the richest milk, the choicest cheeses, fruits from the sun-drenched slopes. He promises her a life in his cave, describing it not as a prison, but as a cozy home, blissfully unaware of how such an offer must sound to a free nymph of the open ocean. It is a scene of tragicomedy, both ridiculous and profoundly sad. This is the raw, elemental force trying to connect with the beautiful, elusive soul. And of course, Galatea rejects him. She is already in love with a mortal shepherd named Odysseus, a being of her own delicate and pastoral world. The giant's love turns to jealous rage, and in a final act of brute passion, he kills his rival by crushing him beneath a mountain. Even in this softer tale, the Cyclops' unintegrated power leads to destruction. But for a moment, we saw something else. We saw vulnerability. We saw a being defined by appetite experience, a yearning that was not for food, but for connection. This changes the esoteric symbol dramatically. The love-struck Polyphemus represents the first, clumsy awakening of the unconscious giant within us. It is that moment when the repressed parts of our psyche, the raw instincts and buried emotions, stir and reach out for something higher, something beautiful and integrated. They do not know how to do it gracefully. Their attempts are awkward, even grotesque. The inner giant might try to express long-buried grief through inappropriate anger. It might try to show love through overwhelming intensity that frightens others away. It might offer the gifts of its own dark cave, the insights from our pain or our primal nature, to a conscious self that is not yet ready to receive them. This mythic episode is an allegory for the painful, necessary attempt to unite opposites within the self. Polyphemus is the fixed, solid earth. Galatea is the flowing, changing sea. He is focused singularity. She is adaptable multiplicity. The integration of these forces is the great work of inner alchemy. It is the marriage of the deep, instinctual power of the shadow with the conscious, graceful awareness of the soul. The failure of their union in the story is not an endpoint, but a stage. It shows that brute force cannot win beauty, and that beauty alone cannot tame the brute. A higher synthesis is required. The giant must learn a new song. The nymph must learn to see the treasure in the cave. This tragicomic love story ultimately asks us a gentle, probing question. Where within you is a clumsy, powerful longing trying to make itself known? What raw, unpolished part of your nature is reaching for a beauty or a wholeness it does not yet understand how to embrace? That awkward reach, that first failed song, is not a sign of monstrosity. It is the beginning of the giant's redemption. That clumsy longing for connection is the first spark in the alchemist's furnace. The esoteric tradition of alchemy, often misunderstood as mere primitive chemistry, provides perhaps the most precise symbolic map for the Cyclops' true nature and purpose. In the alchemical quest, the goal was the creation of the philosopher's stone, a substance said to transmute base metals into gold and grant eternal life. But the wise alchemists always insisted this was an inner process, a metaphor for the purification and enlightenment of the human soul. The Cyclops stands as a powerful, living emblem of its most crucial and terrifying stage. The journey begins with what the alchemists called the negrito, the blackening. This is not a physical color, but a state of being. It represents the primal, chaotic, undifferentiated matter, the raw, unformed consciousness, the shadowy contents of the psyche that must be confronted. It is the dark cave before any light enters. It is the giant in his solitude, a mass of undirected power and instinct. This state was sometimes symbolized by the black sun, a sun that gives no light, only a consuming inward heat. This is the exact quality of the Cyclops' single eye, a sun in the face that sees only its own internal landscape. The alchemist's first task was to gather this prima materia, this base material, and place it in the sealed vessel, the vas hermeticum. Think of Polyphemus' cave, sealed by the massive boulder. It is the perfect alchemical vessel, a closed space where a monstrous transformation must occur. Inside this vessel, the material is subjected to intense heat, the ignes in naturalis, the unnatural fire of spiritual torment and introspection. This is the forge of the primordial Cyclopes brought inward. Their divine furnace, where thunderbolts were shaped, becomes the alchemist's own heart and mind, heated by the fires of suffering, doubt, and self-examination. The giant's fierce, focused energy is not the enemy of this process. It is its essential fuel. The act of the Cyclopes crafting weapons for the gods is a direct allegory for the alchemical operation. They take the raw, chaotic elements, the thunder, lightning, and brightness that were imprisoned in Tartarus, and through supreme, focused skill, they refine and shape them into instruments of divine order. This is the transmutation of lead into gold. The lead is our base consciousness, our unexamined fears, our primal hungers, our shadowy complexes, the very substance of the inner Polyphemus. The gold is the enlightened spirit, the integrated self, the lightning bolt of clarified will and purpose. The Cyclops, therefore, becomes the personification of the transformative fire itself. He is not the metal being worked. He is the relentless heat and pressure that works it. To do the true inner work, we must become both the alchemist and the Cyclops. We must have the courage to descend into our own negrito, to sit in the dark cave with our own monstrous aspects, and then apply the fierce, undivided focus of the single eye to that material. This is not a gentle process. It means staring directly at our wounds, our rages, our shames, with unwavering attention, allowing the heat of that honest gaze to break them down. It is the psychological equivalent of blinding the giant, not to destroy him, but to shatter his limited perception, so a new one can emerge from the ashes. The single eye, in this light, is the lens of ruthless self-observation. The reward for enduring this inner negrito is the next stage, the albedo, the whitening, a state of purification and clarity that emerges only after the blackness has been fully processed. So the myth asks us a profound alchemical question. What base metal within you, what shadowy aspect of your own psyche is waiting in the dark vessel of your awareness, calling for the focused, transformative fire of the Cyclops to begin its work of transmutation? Odysseus did not merely blind a monster to save his skin. He performed a brutal, necessary surgery on consciousness itself. That sharpened olive wood stake, hardened in the fire, is one of the most potent symbols in all of myth. It is not a simple weapon. It represents the focused will and the penetrating intellect, tools of the conscious mind, heated to a white-hot point of absolute determination. When Odysseus drives this instrument into the giant's single eye, the act is grotesque, yes, but from an esoteric perspective, it is profoundly symbolic. He is not destroying sight. He is destroying a specific kind of sight, He is annihilating the lower, egoic perception that Polyphemus embodies. That single eye, focused only on its own appetites and its own isolated reality, must be shattered for any new awareness to be born. This is a dark initiatory rite, a terrifying threshold every spiritual seeker must eventually face. The initiate must use their own sharpened will to pierce the illusion of their own limited self, the giant within that believes it is the entirety of the world. It is an act of profound violence against one's own ignorance, and like all true initiations, it carries a heavy price. Odysseus's victory is immediate, but his punishment is long and arduous. Polyphemus calls upon his father, Poseidon, god of the deep, uncharted seas, and the giant's curse falls upon the hero. For 10 years, Odysseus is denied his homecoming, his nostos. He is tossed by storms, shipwrecked on strange shores, and dragged through a gauntlet of trials that strip him of everything: his ships, his men, his pride. This wandering is not an accident of bad luck. It is the classic initiatory ordeal. The blinding of the inner giant does not grant instant enlightenment. It opens a wound, a rupture in the old self, through which the chaotic, transformative waters of the psyche come flooding in. Poseidon's rage is the turbulence of the unconscious, now unleashed because its guardian, the old, egoic way of seeing, has been violently deposed. Odysseus must navigate this inner ocean, this state of being utterly lost, before he can find his true home. His journey becomes a slow, painful integration. Each island he visits, from the lotus eaters of forgetfulness to the seductive paralysis of Circe's island, represents another aspect of the self he must understand and move beyond. The blinding of Polyphemus was the catalytic event that set this entire process in motion. It was the point of no return. Before it, Odysseus was a clever warrior trying to get home. After it, he became a soul undergoing a transformation. The myth suggests that wisdom, true homecoming, is impossible as long as the ego giant sits unchallenged in its cave, believing itself to be the greatest power. That giant must be confronted. Its limited vision must be ended. Only then can the real journey, the journey through the vast, confusing, but ultimately illuminating sea of the soul, truly begin. So we must ask ourselves, not as a judgment but as an invitation, what lower form of perception within us, what egoic giant might need to be courageously, painfully seen through for our own deeper voyage to commence. That piercing stake of intellect reveals a universal symbol. Centuries after Odysseus blinded his giant, a very different single eye emerged from the hidden currents of Western esotericism, one that gazes not from a monstrous face, but from the peak of a radiant pyramid. This is the eye of providence, the all-seeing eye you will find on the reverse of the United States dollar bill, a symbol steeped in Masonic and Enlightenment thought. At first glance, it seems worlds apart from the Cyclops. One is a symbol of divine order and benevolent oversight, floating in a triangle of light above an unfinished pyramid. The other is a mark of brute, chaotic force, yet they share a profound and undeniable core, the archetype of singular, supreme perception. The eye of providence represents omniscience, the watchful gaze of a creator that sees all of time and space at once. It is the eye of God, or in a more philosophical sense, the enlightened mind that has transcended duality to perceive the unified whole. It sees not with two eyes that judge separation, but with one eye that comprehends the interconnected tapestry of all existence. This is precisely the same perceptual shift the primordial Cyclopes possessed in their divine forge. Their single eye was not looking at metal and flame. It was seeing the potential thunderbolt within the cosmic unity, the finished form within the raw chaos. They worked with a vision that saw the end in the beginning, a godlike foresight. So we have two expressions of the same powerful idea. The Cyclops embodies this singular perception in its raw, unintegrated, earthly form. a force still tangled with instinct and appetite. The eye of providence represents the same principle fully spiritualized, refined, and lifted into the realm of pure mind and divine oversight. It is the giant's eye, cleansed of its monstrous ego and ascended to the heavens. This is not to say the founding fathers were secretly worshiping Polyphemus. It is to recognize how ancient, archetypal images of power and perception are constantly repurposed. Secret societies and esoteric traditions, like Freemasonry, acted as conduits for these old symbols, filtering them through layers of philosophy and sacred geometry. The triangle surrounding the eye of providence is key. In sacred geometry, the triangle is a symbol of manifestation, the first shape to emerge from the unity of the point. The eye within it signifies the conscious awareness that guides this manifestation into being. It is the blueprint, the divine architect's plan. Now, think back to the triangle's rough, earthly counterpart, the Cyclopean cave. It too is a container, a vessel where raw materials are transformed. The giant within, with his focused gaze, is the unrefined version of that architect, a creator still bound to the earth, but a creator nonetheless. This parallel invites a thrilling speculation. Could these symbols be fragments of a much older, lost understanding of consciousness itself, a tradition that knew the power of the unified gaze, whether it was called the eye of the giant smith or the eye of the grand architect? The symbols journey from the dark caves of myth to the bright pinnacle of a pyramid printed on global currency, shows how these deep psychic patterns persist. They are dressed in the costume of their time, but their core message remains. True power, whether for creation or governance, stems from a perception that sees beyond the surface, that focuses on the essential pattern behind the chaos. So the next time you hold a dollar bill, look at that watchful eye. See it not just as a historical curiosity, but as a distant cousin to the giant's gaze. One represents the fear of a power we do not understand. The other represents the aspiration to wield that same focused vision with wisdom and benevolence. The space between them is the entire journey of human consciousness, striving to lift the eye from the cave to the summit. That eye on the pyramid is not alone in its vigil. Across the vast expanse of human imagination, from the misty shores of Ireland to the frozen forests of Japan, the single eye stares back at us. The Cyclops is not merely a Greek invention. It is a universal motif, a recurring character in the global theater of myth, and this widespread echo tells us something profound about the architecture of the human mind itself. Take the Celtic tradition, for instance. Here we meet Balor of the Evil Eye, a king of the monstrous Fomorians. His story is strikingly familiar. Balor possesses one eye that is normally kept closed because its gaze is so potent, so concentrated with destructive force, that it can kill armies and wither the land with a single glance. This is not a tool of creation like the Cyclops forge, but a weapon of pure annihilation. Yet the parallel is undeniable. Both beings channel an immense, terrifying power through a single organ of sight. Their eye is not for seeing the world as it is, but for projecting a will so fierce it alters reality. The difference is one of intent, not essence. The myth even shares a crucial plot point. Balor is ultimately defeated when a hero, Lug, drives a sling stone into his deadly eye, blinding him. The echo of Odysseus' stake is unmistakable. It is as if cultures separated by continents and seas were all dreaming the same nightmare and crafting the same symbolic solution. Journey east to Japanese folklore, and while you may not find a literal giant, you encounter beings like the Yuki Anna, the snow woman, whose beauty is as chilling as her gaze. Or consider the myriad spirits and demons, the Oni, often depicted with a single, central eye. These entities represent a concentrated, often malicious, spiritual force. They are manifestations of nature's unforgiving aspects, or of human vice condensed into a monstrous form. Their single eye symbolizes a kind of predatory focus, an undivided attention fixed upon a human victim or a specific purpose, much like the Cyclops' hunger fixed upon Odysseus' crew. In Norse mythology, the great god Odin famously sacrifices one of his own eyes at the well of Mimir to gain infinite wisdom. He willingly exchanges dual vision for inner sight, trading the perception of the physical world's duality for the piercing knowledge of the unseen realms. Odin becomes, in a sense, a voluntary Cyclops. His single eye now sees the threads of fate, the runes of power, the secrets hidden from normal sight. This is the archetype in its most refined, divine form. The single eye is no longer a mark of monstrosity, but a hard-won symbol of transcendent knowledge, a conscious choice to focus on the essential over the superficial. Slavic tales, too, whisper of forest giants and one-eyed witches, beings of old magic whose gaze can curse or bless. This pattern, this monocular motif appearing independently across the globe, is the key. It points far beyond simple cultural exchange or coincidence. It suggests that the Cyclops archetype is baked into the very foundations of human consciousness. Carl Jung would call this a primordial image, an archetype rising from the collective unconscious. It is a psychic pattern, a deep-seated understanding that emerges whenever humans try to conceptualize immense, concentrated power, especially power tied to perception. The single eye becomes the perfect symbol for a force that is all-consuming, undivided, and terrifying in its intensity. Whether that force is the creative focus of a divine smith, the destructive rage of a monster, the predatory intent of a spirit, or the omniscient wisdom of a god, the imagery remains hauntingly consistent. This comparative lens reveals the true nature of our journey. We are not just unmasking a Greek monster, we are decoding a fundamental piece of the human psychic code. The Cyclops, in all its global variations, represents humanity's intuitive grasp of a profound esoteric truth, that true power, for good or ill, requires a collapse of our scattered awareness into a point of fierce singularity. It is the recognition that to create or destroy on a grand scale, one must first learn to see with one eye alone. This partnership in the divine forge reveals a perfect alchemy of opposites. After their liberation by Zeus, the primordial Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes, and Arges, did not simply return to their solitary labors. Mythology tells us they took their place beside another smith, the Olympian god Hephaestus, in his legendary workshop. This workshop was often said to be deep within a volcano, a place where Earth's raw, fiery heart met the ingenuity of a divine mind. Hephaestus himself is a fascinating figure. Cast from Olympus for being lame, he is the god of blacksmiths, craftsmen, and technology. He represents not brute force, but perfected skill, intricate design, and the patient application of art. His creations are marvels of complexity, from automatons that move with a life of their own to exquisite jewelry for the gods. He is order, precision, and conscious intention. The Cyclopes standing beside him are something else entirely. They are the embodiment of the raw materials he works with. They are the thunder, the lightning, and the blinding flash. They are the unthinking, volcanic heat of the furnace itself, the sheer muscle needed to lift and hammer the unformed masses of metal. In this partnership, we see a profound symbolic truth about the nature of creation itself, whether we are speaking of a physical artifact, a spiritual breakthrough, or a work of art. True wonder is never born from raw chaos alone, nor from sterile technique alone. It is born from the marriage of the two. Hephaestus provides the blueprint, the disciplined hand, the knowing eye for detail. The Cyclopes provide the explosive energy, the fearless power, the connection to the primal source. One cannot work without the other. A volcano without a shaping intelligence is just a natural disaster. A brilliant mind without a connection to primal energy is just a theory forever unmanifest. This is the esoteric lesson for every seeker and every creator. Your Hephaestus is your trained skill, your daily practice, your knowledge of the rules, your disciplined mind. It is the part of you that shows up to the meditation cushion, that learns the techniques of your craft, that studies the sacred texts. This is essential, but it is only half of the equation. Your inner Cyclopes are the raw, often terrifying forces of inspiration. They are the sudden flash of insight that comes from nowhere, the surge of emotion that fuels a poem, the fierce determination that arises from a place deeper than thought, the wild, untamed vision that defies all conventional rules. For too long, spiritual and artistic traditions have sometimes taught us to fear or suppress these Cyclopean energies, to see them as monstrous or unrefined. But the myth shows us they are not the enemy. They are the indispensable partners. The disciplined mind must learn to welcome the raw power, to channel it, not to cage it. The raw power must consent to be guided by the skilled hand, to be given form, not to rage incoherently. In the heat of that volcanic workshop, under the watchful eye of the lame god and the focused gaze of the one-eyed giants, the weapons of the gods were forged. In your own inner workshop, what wonders are waiting to be shaped from the alliance between your skill and your deepest, most powerful instincts? That volcanic workshop has never truly closed. Its fires still burn in the hidden corners of modern occult practice, where the Cyclops is not a relic, but a living current of power. In contemporary esoteric circles, the one-eyed giant has been resurrected as a potent spirit, an archetypal force to be engaged with directly. You will not find him listed in the classical grimoires alongside angels and demons, but in the personalized systems of chaos magicians, neo-pagan pathworkers, and those who walk the edges of the occult landscape. Here, the Cyclops is recognized as a raw, untamed expression of the very principles we have traced, a being of immense utility and equal peril. For the modern practitioner, the giant offers a direct line to that fierce, singular focus. Imagine a magician preparing for a major working, a ritual that requires every ounce of their will to be laser-focused on a single outcome. The distractions of daily life, the doubts, the competing thoughts, these are the many-headed beasts that scatter magical energy. In such a moment, a practitioner might choose to invoke the essence of the Cyclops. The goal is not to summon a 30-foot monster into their living room, but to call upon that archetypal energy of undivided attention. They might visualize that central eye opening within their own mind, its gaze burning away all peripheral noise until only the core intent remains. This is the giant as a spiritual tool, a psychic forge where one's will is heated and hammered into a weapon as precise and potent as Zeus's thunderbolt. Others might seek the Cyclops for his deep connection to primal earth energies, the raw, telluric force that Polyphemus embodied. A witch or druid working with the powers of a specific mountain, a deep cave, or a wild, untamed landscape might see the Cyclops as a genius loci, a spirit of that place. Engaging with this aspect is about tapping into the ancient, non-human consciousness of the land itself, a force that is powerful, indifferent, and utterly foundational. It is a reminder that magic is not all ether and light, but is rooted in the bone and stone of the world. Yet every serious practitioner who works with such forces echoes the old myths with a solemn warning. Invoking the Cyclops is not a parlor trick. It is an act of psychological and spiritual risk. The giant's energy is neutral and immensely concentrated. To invite it in is to open your inner landscape to a force that does not understand nuance, compromise, or compassion. The primary danger is the very thing you might seek, singular focus, taken to a monstrous extreme. You might gain the power to forge your will into reality, but in the process, you could become like Polyphemus in his cave, blind to all perspectives but your own. Your magical goal might be achieved, but at the cost of your humanity, your relationships, your connection to the multifaceted beauty of life. This is the spiritual inflation we discussed, now enacted through ritual. The giant does not share space well. Invoke him for focus, and you may find yourself unable to turn that focus off, becoming obsessed, rigid, and isolated. Seek his earth power, and you might become heavy, stubborn, and ruled by base appetites you can no longer control. The modern occult view therefore holds the Cyclops in a tense, respectful balance. He is a potent emblem of otherness, a representation of a consciousness that is not human, not angelic, not demonic, but fundamentally elemental and archetypal. He exists in the modern pantheon as a living warning about the price of power and a testament to the raw materials of creation that still dwell in the unseen world. To work with him is to acknowledge that some forces are not meant to be domesticated, only cautiously, respectfully channeled, with the full understanding that you are playing with a psychic fire hot enough to blind the wielder. This leads us to a final, unavoidable frontier. If the Cyclops is such a fundamental pattern, echoing from ancient skulls to modern rituals, could its true origin point even further back to a time before human memory? This psychological cave is not just an ancient metaphor, it is a modern epidemic of the mind, a condition we can call the Polyphemus Complex. This is the state where a person, or an entire movement, develops a vision of immense power and clarity, but one that is tragically narrow. Like the giant in his cavern, they see the world through a single, burning lens. Every idea, every piece of information, every other person is perceived only in relation to that fixed point of view. Anything that does not align is not considered a different perspective. It is seen as an intruder, a threat, or simply raw material to be consumed. This is the intellectual and spiritual cannibalism at the heart of the complex. Other viewpoints are not digested for nutrients, for wisdom, or for growth. They are devoured whole to feed the giant's hunger for confirmation, or they are dashed against the rocks of dogma. The single eye does not seek to understand. It seeks to dominate. We see the Polyphemus Complex manifest wherever nuance dies. It thrives in the echo chambers of absolutist ideologies, where the boulder of confirmation bias seals the entrance to any challenging thought. It fuels the engine of extremism, where a singular, purified vision justifies any means. It whispers in the ear of the dogmatic believer, whether in religion, politics, or even science, who holds their truth so tightly they crush the life out of it. The complex turns curiosity into certainty and discussion into decree. The giant within feels powerful, righteous, and supremely focused, but from the outside, we see a being trapped in a dark, self-made prison, roaring at shadows, incapable of perceiving the vast, colorful world just beyond the stone that blocks its own exit. The myth, however, does not leave us without a remedy. Polyphemus was not defeated by a bigger giant. He was outwitted by Odysseus, whose name has become synonymous with a very different set of qualities. The antidote to the Polyphemus complex is the cultivation of an Odyssean mind. This is not about mere cleverness or deception. It is about the psychological virtues of cunning in the sense of strategic adaptability, of the willingness to see the world from multiple angles, and of the courage to engage with perspectives that are foreign and even frightening. Odysseus did not fight the giant on the giant's terms. He observed, he adapted. He used the giant's own tools, his sheep and his blindness, against him. He thought in terms of escape and integration, not conquest and consumption. To escape our own ideological caves, we must practice this Odyssean flexibility. It means consciously seeking out information that challenges our deepest held beliefs, not to demolish them necessarily, but to test their strength and refine their shape. It involves listening to understand, not just to rebut. It requires the humility to admit that our single, focused vision no matter how powerful it feels, might be missing entire dimensions of reality happening right under our noses. The Odyssean mind is a navigator. It uses the stars of principle for direction, but it is always reading the currents, aware of the winds, and ready to adjust the sails. It knows that the journey home to truth is never a straight line through a dark cave, but a long, winding voyage across a sea of complexity. The next time you feel the walls of certainty closing in and the roar of your own righteous conviction growing loud, ask yourself this Odyssean question. What stone have I used to seal my cave, and what would it take to have the courage to roll it aside, even just for a moment, to let a new kind of light stream in? The forge of the giant is not locked in a distant mythic past. Its fires can be stoked within the inner sanctum of your own awareness, transforming esoteric insight into tangible personal power. This is where the symbol becomes a tool and the legend becomes a living practice. One of the most potent ways to engage with the Cyclopean archetype is through a guided meditation, a ritual of the mind where you consciously enter the volcanic workshop to forge a new part of yourself. Begin by finding a quiet space and settling into a comfortable posture. Close your physical eyes, and in your mind's eye, see yourself descending into the heart of an ancient, dormant volcano. The air is warm and dry, smelling of sulfur and hot stone. You walk down a rough-hewn tunnel until you emerge into a vast, cavernous chamber. This is the Cyclopean forge. In its center, a pit of molten rock glows with a fierce orange light, the very fire of primal creativity. You are not a visitor here. You are the smith. Now call upon the focused gaze. Feel a warmth gathering at the center of your own forehead, a point of intense concentration. This is your inner eye, the lens of pure intention. Let all distracting thoughts, all doubts and peripheral worries, be burned away in the heat of that single pointed attention. Your entire being is focused on one purpose, one act of creation. Before you, on the great anvil of the soul, lies the raw material. This is not metal, but the unshaped potential for a change you wish to manifest. Perhaps it is the courage to speak your truth, the discipline to master a new skill, or the clarity to release an old fear. See this intention as a lump of dark, shimmering ore, holding infinite possibility within its rough form. With the hammer of your will, you begin to strike. Each blow is a conscious choice, a committed action toward your goal. You are not mindlessly pounding. You are shaping with the precision of the primordial giants, your inner eye seeing the finished form within the chaos. The heat of the forge is the passion you bring to this transformation. It must be hot enough to make the material pliable, but not so wild it consumes everything. This is where the mythic act of blinding finds its ritual expression. As you work, you might visualize the old, limited version of yourself, the Polyphemus of your own doubts, staring with its narrow, hungry eye. In a decisive moment, you take the heated stake of your newfound clarity and you pierce that illusion. You are not destroying a part of yourself, but shattering the perception that kept you small and isolated in a dark cave. The old giant roars its final protest and dissolves into the shadows of the forge, its energy now freed to fuel your creation. Now, the crucial balance. No blade is tempered by fire alone. As your symbolic tool, a key for unlocking potential, a sword for cutting through obstacles, a talisman for protection begins to take its final shape. You must quench it. Imagine drawing it from the fire and plunging it into a pool of cool, clear water that springs from the deepest part of the cavern. This is the water of reflection and integration. The hissing steam represents the release of residual resistance, and the act of quenching hardens the new aspect, making it durable for the world outside the ritual. Without this step, you risk spiritual burnout, wielding a tool of white-hot intention that is brittle and liable to shatter under pressure, or worse, one that burns you and everyone around you. The cooling waters represent compassion patience, and the necessary return to the multifaceted reality of daily life. When you feel the process is complete, hold your newly forged inner tool. Feel its weight, its purpose, its reality in your hands. Then, in the silence of the forge, place it within your heart center, allowing its energy to become a permanent part of your being. Slowly bring your awareness back to the room, carrying the memory of the heat, the focus, and the cool, integrating waters with you. This ritual is a map for wielding Cyclopean power wisely. It teaches that the fierce fire of undivided focus must always be followed by the compassionate waters of integration, ensuring that what you create in the hidden forge serves not to isolate you in a new cave of obsession, but to connect you more authentically to the world you are striving to shape. The molten stone of the forge cools, but the giant's image is never still. It escapes the confines of myth and strides directly onto the canvas of human culture, its form shifting with the fears and fascinations of every new age. On a weathered piece of ancient Greek pottery, we see the earliest visual echoes. Here, Polyphemus is often depicted in the moment of his brutal feasting, a monstrous, subhuman figure emphasizing raw savagery. He is a warning painted in black and terracotta, a symbol of the chaos that lies beyond the civilized world. This portrayal solidified for centuries, the giant frozen as a pure antagonist, a force of nature to be overcome by heroic cunning. Then, in the 17th century, the French painter Nicolas Poussin offered a startling new perspective. In his masterpiece, Landscape with Polyphemus, the giant is not a terror in a cave. He sits high on a cliff, a part of the majestic, wild landscape itself. He is massive, yes, but he is turned away from us, playing a set of panpipes toward the distant sea, where the tiny figure of Galatea sails. Here, the brute becomes a melancholic romantic. Poussin captures the giant's longing, his unrequited love, his poignant connection to a nature that is both beautiful and overwhelming. The single eye is not shown, its horror replaced by the giant's contemplative, muscular back. This is a profound remasking. The Renaissance mind, rediscovering classical themes, infused them with a new complexity, seeing in the monster a capacity for deep, if tragic, emotion. The Cyclops was no longer just a thing to be blinded. He was a being capable of being heartbroken. The 20th century brought a different kind of magic, and with it, a new kind of giant. In the stop-motion wonder of the seventh voyage of Sinbad, the Cyclops is a thrilling spectacle of cinematic menace. Created by the genius Ray Harryhausen, this creature is a pure engine of fantasy adventure. Its roars are iconic, its movements imbued with a tangible, jerky life that feels both unreal and terrifyingly present. This Cyclops is a test for the hero, a magnificent obstacle in a world of wonders. There is no sympathy here, but there is awe. The giant becomes a beloved monster, a symbol of childhood fears faced and conquered in the safety of a movie theater. It represents the era's fascination with bringing myths to life through sheer technical ingenuity, remaking the ancient terror into a figure of entertainment. Our modern era continues to reinterpret the symbol, often leaning into the duality the myths always contained. In the Percy Jackson series, the Cyclopes are pluralized and diversified. Some, like Polyphemus, remain antagonistic, but others, such as Tyson, Percy's half-brother, are deeply sympathetic. Tyson is kind, loyal, and emotionally vulnerable, his single eye a mark of his unique perception rather than his monstrosity. This reflects a contemporary desire to reclaim the other, to find the hero in the figure once deemed purely monstrous. It asks a new generation to look past appearances and simplistic labels. Similarly, more serious adaptations of the Odyssey now often linger on the giant's perspective, portraying Polyphemus not just as a villain, but as a territorial being violated by arrogant intruders, adding a layer of moral ambiguity to Odysseus' celebrated cunning. This evolution from pottery to pixel is not a random series of makeovers. It is the living breath of the archetype. Each era looks into the single eye of the Cyclops and sees its own reflection. The ancient Greeks saw the threat to their fledgling civilization. The Renaissance saw the sorrow of the unintegrated soul. The classic film era saw a thrilling challenge for human resourcefulness. Today, we often see the misunderstood outsider, or the raw power that can be an ally. Every new mask applied to the giant reveals what that culture fears, values, or seeks to understand about power, isolation, and the nature of monstrosity itself. This constant reshaping is the proof that these are not dead stories, but active, psychic tools. The myth evolves because we do. Our collective consciousness reaches into the old symbolic well and draws up a version of the giant that speaks directly to our current dilemmas, offering new layers of esoteric meaning every time we dare to look it in the eye. Even the name of the giant is a riddle waiting to be solved. Cyclops. We say it so casually, but its roots in ancient Greek hold a universe of hidden meaning. The word comes from two parts, kyklos, meaning circle, and ops, meaning eye. The direct translation is circle-eyed or round-eyed. At first, this seems purely descriptive, a simple reference to that single, circular socket in the middle of the forehead. But in the language of symbol and myth, nothing is ever that simple. The circle is one of humanity's oldest and most profound symbols. It represents wholeness, completion, and the infinite cycle of time. It is the shape of the sun and the moon, the horizon, and the Ouroboros serpent eating its own tail. It symbolizes the cosmos in its entirety, a perfect, boundless unity. So when we call this being circle-eyed, we are not just describing an anatomical feature. We are naming a cosmic principle. The single eye sits at the center of that circle. This image, a central point within a perfect circumference, is instantly recognizable across spiritual traditions. It is the mandala, a geometric design used in Hinduism and Buddhism as a tool for meditation, representing the universe and the journey of the soul toward its center. In Jungian psychology, the mandala is a symbol of the self, the integrated totality of the psyche, where all opposites are reconciled. The Cyclops, by its very name, is a living mandala. It embodies the paradox of perceiving the infinite whole, the circle, through a single, undivided point of focus, the eye. This linguistic analysis cracks open the myth's deepest layer. The name Cyclops contains its own esoteric instruction. It tells us that true vision, the vision of the giant, is about holding a paradox. It is the ability to see the vast, interconnected circle of all existence while maintaining a fierce, singular point of attention. The circle is the macrocosm, the entire field of reality. The single eye is the microcosm, the individual consciousness. The miracle and the challenge is that one contains the other. To see the circle fully, you must become the unwavering point at its center, and to truly see from that central point, you must comprehend the entire circle that surrounds it. This is why the primordial Cyclopes could forge the thunderbolt. Their single eye was not looking at a piece of metal. It was focused on the center of a cosmic circle, perceiving the pattern of divine power within the wholeness of creation and pulling it into form. Conversely, Polyphemus represents the failure of this paradox. His eye is still a point in a circle, but the circle has collapsed. He has mistaken his isolated point of perception for the entire universe. His world is not the boundless kyklos, but the dark, enclosing circle of his cave. He sees only his own appetite, his own rage, his own self, and thus he becomes a prisoner of the very symbol meant to represent liberation. So the name itself is a map and a warning. It guides us toward the highest spiritual aim, the integration of the one and the all, the self and the cosmos. And it cautions us against the spiritual catastrophe of contracting that infinite circle down to the narrow confines of our own ego. The giant's true name whispers the ultimate goal: to see the world not with two eyes that separate, but with one eye that unifies, placed perfectly at the still point of the turning world. Odysseus's clever escape came with a divine price tag. The moment the giant's eye burst into steam and blood, Polyphemus cried out not just in pain, but to his father, the god of the deep, uncharted sea. Poseidon heard, and his wrath fell upon the hero like a tidal wave. For 10 long years, Odysseus would be denied his homecoming, tossed by storms, broken by shipwrecks, and stripped of every companion. This is the engine of the entire Odyssey, the curse that drives the plot. But from our esoteric vantage point, Poseidon's fury is far more than a father's revenge. It is a perfect, terrifying illustration of the universal law of cause and effect. Every action, even one taken in desperate self-defense, sends a vibration out into the fabric of reality. Odysseus performed a necessary, transgressive act. He used his human intellect to violate a divine sun, to shatter a form of consciousness, however monstrous. That act was a stone thrown into the cosmic pond. The returning waves, the karmic consequence, were inevitable. Poseidon, as lord of the unpredictable, emotional, and often destructive sea, personifies those returning waves. He is the embodiment of the chaos that follows any profound disruption, even a disruption of a dark and stagnant order. Think of it this way: you might be entirely justified in demolishing an old, crumbling wall that blocks your path. But the act of demolition sends dust and debris flying. It changes the landscape. It exposes things that were hidden. The demolition itself is quick, but cleaning up the aftermath, navigating the new, open space, and dealing with the unsettled dust takes time and care. Odysseus blinded the giant, but he did not then possess the wisdom to handle the unleashed energies that act set free. His journey home, therefore, is not a punishment in the sense of a jail sentence. It is the necessary process of working out the karma, of learning to sail on the very seas his action made turbulent. Each island he visits, each trial he faces, from the lotus-induced forgetfulness to the seductive paralysis of Circe's island, is a lesson in integration. He is being forced to develop the qualities he lacked when he drove in the stake. He must learn patience from Calypso, humility from his own powerlessness, and discernment from the ghosts in the underworld. The curse is the curriculum. Without the blinding of Polyphemus, Odysseus would have returned to Ithaca quickly, still just the clever, proud warrior who left. He would have remained a hero, but not a wise one. The long detour, forced by the karmic backlash of his own necessary violence, is what transforms him. It burns away his arrogance and forges a king capable of true reintegration, one who understands both the cunning of the fox and the patience of the deep ocean. This is the profound paradox at the heart of spiritual growth. Sometimes, to move forward, we must commit a transgressive act against our own inner stagnation. We must blind an old way of seeing, even if it hurts, even if it feels like a violation. But we must then be prepared for the long voyage home that follows, for the Poseidon within our own psyche to rise up and demand we learn the lessons our bold act made necessary. The curse is not the end of the story. It is the difficult, essential middle chapter where the true alchemy occurs. That cave sealed by a boulder is far more than a monster's den. It is the entire symbolic landscape of the myth, a stage set with profound meaning. In the language of universal symbols, the cave represents the subconscious mind itself, the dark, fertile, and often frightening realm beneath the surface of our waking awareness. It is both womb and tomb, a place where things are born and where things are buried. For Polyphemus, the cave is a tomb for his own potential and a womb for his monstrous ego. He uses it as a pen, a place to imprison his flocks and to consume his guests. It is a closed system, a cycle of appetite and stagnation where nothing new is created, only devoured. His entire world is this dark interior, and he is both its king and its prisoner. Odysseus, however, is thrust into this landscape against his will. He represents the conscious mind, the part of us that navigates the sunlit world of strategy and society, suddenly trapped in the damp, irrational dark. His heroic task is not to conquer the cave from the outside, but to transform it from within, using its own elements as the keys to freedom. And this is the masterstroke of the symbolism. The tools for escape are not brought from the outside world. They are found within the cave itself. The olive wood, a symbol of peace, wisdom, and Athena's favor, is hardened in the very fire the giant uses to cook his gruesome meals. The hero takes an instrument of consumption and transforms it into an instrument of liberation. Even more brilliantly, the means of physical escape are the giant's own sheep. Odysseus and his men do not fight their way out. They cling to the undersides of the creatures the giant tends, becoming one with the very resources of the subconscious landscape. They escape not by destroying the cave, but by understanding its hidden pathways and using its own logic against its master. This transforms the entire encounter from a simple monster slaying into a stunning allegory for inner work. The cave is your own unexplored psyche. Polyphemus is the monstrous, consuming aspect of your subconscious, the part that hoards energy, that feeds on fear and rage, that believes it is the entirety of your being. This inner giant pens up your vitality, your creative flux, and consumes your potential guests, the new ideas and energies that try to enter your life. Odysseus is your conscious will and intellect, which must descend into that darkness. You cannot heal what you will not face. The blinding is that searing moment of self-awareness, where you finally see the narrow, self-centered nature of this inner complex for what it is. But awareness alone is not freedom. You must then use the resources of the cave, the very substance of your subconscious, to engineer your escape. The olive wood is your focused attention, hardened in the fires of your own emotional heat. The sheep are the instinctual, animal energies you already possess, which you must learn to move with, not against. You escape the prison of a negative pattern, not by rejecting every part of yourself, but by cleverly redirecting the energy already trapped within it. Your crew, then, becomes a symbol for the fragmented parts of your own soul, your hopes, your talents, your higher aspirations, which are held captive by the dominating, monstrous ego. The hero's journey is to liberate them, to lead them out of the dark cave of subconscious imprisonment and back toward the open sea of integrated purpose. So the next time you feel trapped in a cycle of negative thinking or self-defeating behavior, ask yourself this Odyssean question: what cave have I wandered into? And what resources for my freedom are already hidden in the dark, waiting for my conscious mind to perceive them? The family tree of chaos is both crowded and revealing. To truly grasp the Cyclopes, we must see them not as lonely monsters, but as siblings in a primordial family portrait. Their brothers were the Titans, who would become the first rulers of the cosmos, and the Hecatontures, the hundred-handed ones, beings of such staggering physical might their very name describes their form. All were born from the union of earth and sky, Gaia and Uranus, and together they represent a divine anatomy of raw, undifferentiated power. The Titans were the will to rule, the force that establishes a system, any system, over the formless deep. The Hecatontures were pure, undirected physicality, 100 arms that could seize and shake the foundations of the world, but without a guiding mind. And the Cyclopes, they were the laser point between them. They were not the rulers, nor were they the brute force. They were the focused application of energy, the creative and destructive spark that could take that raw, hundred-handed might and the titanic will to rule and forge them into something specific, something potent. Thunder, lightning, and brightness are not vague concepts. They are targeted, terrifying expressions of power. This familial drama, this war between the generations of gods, is the mythic representation of cosmos being carved from chaos. It is the universe struggling to give itself a form, an order, a conscious direction. The old king, Uranus, fears all his children and imprisons them. The new king, the Titan Kronos, liberates only his Titan siblings and re-imprisons the Cyclopes and Hecatonchyres because he too understands their disruptive potential. It is only Zeus, the architect of a new order, who sees the necessity of them all. He frees the 100-handed ones to be his artillery in the war, their countless arms hurling mountains. And he frees the Cyclopes to be his master smiths, their focused vision crafting the ultimate weapon. The victory of the Olympians is not the destruction of chaos, but its intelligent recruitment. The Titans are deposed and imprisoned, but their essence, the principle of structured rule, is absorbed into the new regime. The Hecatonchyres become the wardens of the defeated. And the Cyclopes take their place at the very heart of the divine workshop. Chaos is not eliminated, it is organized, with each aspect given a purposeful role. This is the profound esoteric key hidden in their family ties. Inside your own mind, you host this same primordial family. Your Titans are the massive, often tyrannical structures of your personality, the ingrained habits, the belief systems, the internal rules that have ruled your inner world for years, perhaps since childhood. They can be productive or destructive, but they are established, and they demand obedience. Your Hecatonchyres are the raw, emotional, and instinctual energies you possess, the 100 arms of passion, fear, love, and rage that can shake you to your core, that feel overwhelming and impossible to direct. And your Cyclopean energy, that is your capacity for fierce, undivided attention. It is the tool you must use to mediate between these forces. You cannot simply let the Titans rule unchallenged, as that leads to stagnation and repression. You cannot let the 100-handed emotions run wild, as that leads to inner turmoil and collapse. The task of conscious evolution is to do what Zeus did. You must have the courage to challenge the old, titanic rules that no longer serve you. You must acknowledge and free the powerful, chaotic emotions you have imprisoned. And then you must employ your Cyclopean focus, that single eye of clear intention, to forge a new alliance. You take the raw material of your emotional power and the structural need for order, and in the workshop of your awareness, you use your focused will to shape them into something new. You forge your own thunderbolt, a clarified purpose that is both powerfully charged and precisely aimed. The myth tells us that order without the creative fire of the Cyclopes is brittle and fearful. And chaos without the shaping vision of the Cyclopes is just a formless, destructive storm. Your inner giant, therefore, is not a problem to be solved. It is the essential craftsman you must empower to build a sovereign self from the magnificent, chaotic family you were born with. That boulder sealing the cave entrance is the ultimate threshold. In the classic hero's journey, a figure like the Cyclops is never just a random monster. He is the guardian of a boundary, a living door between one state of being and the next. Odysseus and his crew have crossed from the known sea into an unknown territory, and the giant is the sovereign of that liminal space. He does not wander the world looking for trouble. He is the trouble that awaits at the border. This archetype appears everywhere in world mythology, from the Sphinx who guards the road to Thebes with a deadly riddle, to the troll under the bridge demanding a toll, to Cerberus watching the gates of the underworld. These beings are tests. They exist to ask a single, profound question of anyone who approaches. Are you worthy to pass? The answer is never found in matching their brute strength. Odysseus's strongest men are effortlessly devoured, proving that direct confrontation with a threshold guardian is a fatal mistake. The key lies in understanding the guardian's nature, its rules, and its fatal flaw. For Polyphemus, that flaw is his utterly literal mind, his inability to conceive of a reality beyond his own senses and appetites. Odysseus's brilliant, life-saving trick hinges on this. When the giant asks his name, the hero replies, "Nobody." It is a masterpiece of cunning, a semantic trap. Later, when Polyphemus is blinded and screams for help, he roars that nobody has heard him. His fellow giants hear this and logically shrug, advising him to pray to his father if nobody is the cause. The ruse works because it speaks the giant's own limited language back to him. Odysseus does not fight the threshold. He navigates its logic. For the spiritual seeker, this reframes every inner Cyclops from a monstrous enemy into a necessary teacher. Those intense barriers that rise up in our path, the dark nights of the soul, the periods of crushing doubt or paralyzing fear, are not random sufferings. They are threshold guardians. They stand at the border between an old version of yourself and a new one. Perhaps you are trying to cultivate a new habit, but a wave of self-sabotaging laziness rises up to consume your efforts. That is your Polyphemus, guarding the cave of your old comforts. Maybe you are on the verge of a creative breakthrough, only to be met by a storm of inner criticism telling you your work is worthless and you should just give up. That roaring voice is your threshold guardian. These inner giants are not there to be annihilated. You cannot simply bully your way past deep-seated fear or decades of conditioning. Trying to do so usually ends with that aspect of yourself devouring your resolve, just as the giant devoured the crew. The myth instructs us to be Odyssean. First, you must observe the guardian without panic. What is its true nature? Is it fear of failure? Is it a craving for approval? Is it the weight of an old story you tell yourself? Name it, but here is the spiritual twist on the nobody ruse. You do not lie to it. You speak a deeper truth. When that inner giant of fear bellows, "Who are you to think you can do this?" you answer with your own cunning truth, "I am nobody." This is not an admission of weakness. It is a declaration of egolessness. You are not the small, separate self that the fear is trying to intimidate. You are the conscious awareness behind the drama. By refusing to identify with the persona the giant expects to fight, you rob it of its target. Your fear cannot consume a nobody. It thrashes in the dark, confused, while the real you, the conscious Odysseus, is already moving, finding the sheep of your latent strengths to cling to for the escape. Passing the guardian requires sacrifice. Odysseus lost men. To pass your inner thresholds, you must be willing to sacrifice something, usually a cherished illusion, a comfortable identity, or a toxic story. You leave it behind in the cave as payment to the giant. The victory is not the guardian's destruction, but your successful passage into a wider landscape. Once you are through, the giant remains, but its power over you is broken. It may still roar from the cave mouth, but you are already on the open sea, carrying with you the very power you needed to outwit it. The guardian tested you, and in passing the test, you integrated a fragment of its fierce resilience into your own spirit. So the next time a colossal, one-eyed doubt blocks your path, remember, it is not your end. It is the sign that you are at a threshold. The question is not how to kill it, but how, with cunning and self-awareness, you will cleverly, wisely find your way through. The journey through the mythic cave has brought us to a final, clear vista. So, what have we truly unmasked? The Cyclops is not a simple monster from a forgotten tale. It is a living, breathing archetype, a mirror held up to the deepest layers of human experience. We have met the divine smith, whose focused vision forged the very weapons of cosmic order. We have confronted the shadow brute, a prisoner of his own appetite and isolation. We have recognized the focused seer, whose single eye pierces illusion to perceive essential truth. We have traced the historical memory, a possible echo of lost peoples and misread bones, and we have faced the psychological complex, the inner giant of unintegrated power that each of us must learn to reckon with. From the volcanic forges of the gods to the damp caves of our own subconscious, this one-eyed giant stands as an eternal challenge. It asks us to examine the nature of true power. Is it the brute force of Polyphemus or the creative alliance of the primordial brothers? It questions our very perception. Do we see the world with two eyes that separate and judge? Or can we learn to focus with the one eye that unifies and understands? And above all, it presents the ultimate task of integration. Can we have the courage of Zeus to free the powerful, chaotic forces we have imprisoned within ourselves, and then, with the skill of the smith, forge them into instruments of purpose and beauty? The myth does not end with a slain giant. It ends with a transformed hero, and a giant who, though blinded, still possesses his power. The work is never finished. So we leave you with this question, not from the script, but from the symbol itself. What one-eyed giants are you facing in your own life? Are they old fears sealed in a cave of avoidance? A singular talent so focused it has become a prison, or perhaps a raw, creative power you have yet to acknowledge and shape? The unmasking is just the beginning. The real journey is what you choose to do with the vision you have gained. Share your reflections in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden layers of esoteric lore, subscribe and ring the bell for more journeys into the unseen stories that shape our world. Until next time, keep both eyes and your third one open.